I never still remember the moment it happened. Like this. The exact second my life changed. And almost elegant. It wasn't the way it slides through everything I believed in. You hear stories about corporate politics, about sharks in suits circling each other, but you never think you'll be the one bleeding in the water. I did. And I'll never forget the moment I realized the people I trusted had gutted me alive. It was a Thursday morning. I walked into the glass-wall boardroom of Strathmore Consulting, my home for 7 years, the company I had poured every ounce of ambition into. I wasn't just an employee. I was their rainmaker, the strategist who closed deals others couldn't even get a meeting for. And that day, I thought I was stepping into my promotion meeting, managing director, the title I'd killed myself for. Instead, the room was colder than the January wind outside. Mark Preston, the CEO, sat at the head of the table, his perfect silver hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights. On his left was Claire Benson, CFO, with a frozen smile and expensive pearl necklace. And on the right, Thomas Yates, my so-called mentor, the man who once told me, "Stick with me, kid, I'll make you king." They didn't offer me a seat. That was the first sign. Mark began, his tone too casual. "Thanks for coming in." "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. "I assume this is about the board decision." Mark's eyes flicked to Thomas. Thomas didn't look at me. My stomach turned to stone. "We appreciate everything you've done for the firm," Mark said smoothly. "But after reviewing the situation with the Alios account, the board has decided to move in a different direction." My brain stalled. The Alios account? We landed Alios. I brought in $80 million in revenue this quarter. "Which is why this is difficult," Claire cut in, her voice dripping fake sympathy. "But there were concerns about your methods. Compliance flagged some issues." I stared at her, then at Thomas, waiting for him to speak, to defend me. He didn't. He just kept his eyes on the polished wood table like a coward. "Effective immediately," Mark continued, "your employment is terminated. Security will escort you out. We'll make sure your severance package reflects your years of service." It hit me like a punch to the chest. I couldn't breathe. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Terminated? After everything? After building their empire? Concerns about my methods? I finally managed. "What concerns?" I've been transparent. Mark raised a hand. "Marcus, let's not make this harder than it needs to be. Sometimes careers take turns we don't expect." The bastard was smiling like he hadn't just destroyed me. Security arrived. 2 men in suits who probably didn't know my name but knew how to move me out quietly. They took my badge, my laptop, even my damn pen. As they walked me past the rows of desks, heads turned. Some looked shocked. Others looked smug. I caught Jenna from marketing whispering behind her hand, eyes wide like she'd just seen a body dragged out of a crime scene. I didn't say a word. Not to them. Not to anyone. I walked out of that building with nothing but the suit on my back and the bitter taste of humiliation in my mouth. When I got to the street, the cold hit me like reality. My phone buzzed. A message from Thomas. "Sorry, kid. It wasn't my call." That was it. 7 years reduced to 7 words. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred, then hurled the phone into the nearest trash can. I didn't want apologies. I wanted blood. The cab ride home was a blur of rage and confusion. I kept replaying the meeting, dissecting every word, every glance. Compliance flagged issues? Bullshit. My methods were aggressive. Sure, but nothing illegal. If they wanted me gone, it wasn't about compliance. It was about control. And then it clicked. Alios. That account was a golden goose. Whoever controlled Alios controlled the market. And I had been the one who brought them in. I had the relationship, the trust. But now that I was out of the picture, guess who would take credit? Thomas, my mentor, the man who told me he'd make me king. By the time I reached my apartment, the rage had solidified into something sharper. This wasn't over. They thought they could toss me aside like trash, use my work to crown themselves? No, they had just declared war. I sat in the dark for hours, staring out the window, the city lights like sparks in a black ocean. And then, slowly, an idea began to form. A dangerous, Brilliant idea. If Strathmore wanted Alio so badly, I'd give it to them, gift-wrapped in their own destruction. But first, I needed information, and I knew exactly where to start. Her name was Lila Grant, Alio's VP of Strategy, sharp as a blade, ambitious, and, most importantly, she trusted me. We'd spent months negotiating the Alio's deal together. I picked up a burner phone the next morning and sent her a message. Need to talk. Urgent. Off the record. She replied within minutes. Meet me at the Ridge. 9 p.m. Come alone. The Ridge was a rooftop bar downtown, all glass and steel and overpriced cocktails. When I walked in, she was already there, legs crossed, a martini in her hand. Her eyes locked on mine as I approached. You look like hell, she said, not unkindly. Rough day at the office, I muttered, sliding into the seat across from her. I heard, she said, swirling her drink. Strathmore cut you loose. What happened? I gave her the sanitized version, compliance issues, politics. She listened, her expression unreadable. They're going to leverage Alio's hard, I said finally. You know that, right? They'll use you to lock down every market segment. And you care because, she asked, arching a brow. Because I know what they are, Lila. They don't partner. They consume. They'll squeeze Alios until there's nothing left but bones. She didn't respond, but her silence told me everything. She knew I wasn't wrong. I'm starting something, I said slowly. A firm that won't just compete with Strathmore. It'll bury them, but I need Alios to make it happen. Her eyes sharpened. You're serious. Dead serious. She leaned back, studying me. You're asking me to betray a signed deal. I'm asking you to choose survival over servitude, I said. You think Strathmore is going to let Alios call the shots? They are already drawing up control clauses. I've seen their playbook. Her lips parted slightly. You have proof? I pulled a flash drive from my pocket and slid it across the table. They're internal projections. Compliance flagged me because I fought them on these terms. Look for yourself. She stared at the drive for a long moment before picking it up. If this is real, you're playing with fire. I smiled, a cold, thin smile. Then it's a good thing I like the heat. We talked for 2 hours. By the end, she didn't agree. Not outright, but she didn't walk away either. That was enough for now. When I left the Ridge, the city felt different. Alive, electric, dangerous. I was no longer Marcus Hale, the man they fired. I was Marcus Hale, the man they underestimated, and I was about to make them regret it. I still remember the moment it happened, the exact second my life changed. It wasn't The next morning, I woke up with clarity sharper than a blade. There was no turning back now. If I hesitated, if I second-guessed myself for even a second, I'd lose everything, including my pride. And pride was all I had left. I made 3 calls that day. The first was to an old college friend, Ethan Briggs, who had a knack for building tech platforms that could make or break consulting firms. He owed me a favor, a big one, and when I told him what I was planning, there was a long silence on the other end before he said, "You're insane," and I'm in. The second call was to Nadia Torres, an analyst who used to work under me before Strathmore chewed her up and spat her out. She was brilliant, ruthless, and burned by the same fire I was. When I told her I wanted her to be my head of market intelligence, she didn't even hesitate. When? She asked. The third call was to my landlord, because I needed to break my lease. If I was going to war, I wasn't doing it from a 1-bedroom apartment that smelled like broken dreams and Chinese takeout. I needed a base. Something small, discreet, but sharp enough to feel like the start of an empire. Within a week, I had an office, if you could call it that. A dingy space above a printing shop, with peeling paint and a view of a dumpster. But it was private, and it was mine. I bought a desk off Craigslist, set up 2 laptops, and stared at the empty whiteboard on the wall like it was a battlefield map. Because that's what it was. The first move was Alios. Without them, I was nothing. With them, I was untouchable. But Strathmore wasn't going to let go easily. They had an army of lawyers and a reputation that could crush anyone dumb enough to challenge them, which meant I needed leverage. That night, I met Lila again. Same rooftop bar, same sharp eyes watching me like a hawk. She didn't waste time with small talk. I looked at the files, she said, sipping her martini. You weren't lying. They are planning to put Alios in a chokehold. They'll drain you dry, I said. Her jaw tightened. My board won't walk away from Strathmore. Not without something better on the table. Then I'll give them better, I said. Faster turnarounds, lower costs, full transparency, and control stays in your hands. She raised an eyebrow. Sounds great, but right now, you're one guy in a cheap suit with a rented office. How exactly do you plan to deliver all that? I smiled, slow and deliberate. You let me worry about that. Her silence was an answer. Not a yes. Not yet, but not a no either. And that was enough to keep moving. The next 2 weeks were hell. I barely slept. Nadia worked like a machine, tearing through market data, mapping every weakness Strathmore had. Ethan built the tech backbone, an analytics platform so powerful it made Strathmore's look like a toy. I maxed out my credit cards, drained my savings, and called in every favor I'd ever earned. And then came the break I needed. Nadia walked into the office one night, her face lit by the glow of her laptop screen. They are overextended, she said, tossing a stack of papers on my desk. Strathmore's betting everything on Alios. If that deal collapses, their stock tanks. I stared at the numbers, a slow grin spreading across my face. This was it. The noose. If I could pull Alios out, Strathmore wouldn't just bleed, they'd hemorrhage. But pulling them out wasn't enough. I needed Alios to come to me willingly, to believe I wasn't just an alternative, I was the future. So I played dirty. I started whisper campaigns through industry channels, anonymous tips about Strathmore's aggressive restructuring and potential compliance investigations. It wasn't even a lie. They'd fired me for so-called compliance issues. Remember? I just gave the rumor a little push. Within days, the whispers turned into questions. Questions turned into doubts. And doubts? Doubts were poison in corporate boardrooms. One night, I was sitting in my office staring at the whiteboard when my phone buzzed. A message from Lila. They're nervous. My board wants options. Can you meet tomorrow? I texted back one word. Yes. The meeting was at Alios headquarters, a gleaming glass tower that screamed money and power. I walked in wearing my best suit, the one I'd kept for special occasions, because today wasn't just business. Today was war. The boardroom was full. Lila, the CEO, a handful of directors. They all looked at me like they weren't sure whether to laugh or listen. I didn't give them the chance to decide. I know you're all wondering why you should trust me. I began. Strathmore is big, safe, established. I'm not. I'm small. I'm lean. But that's exactly why you should trust me. Because I can move faster than they ever will. Because I'm not here to own you. I'm here to make you stronger. And because when Strathmore goes down, and they will, I'll still be standing. The CEO leaned back, skeptical. And what makes you think Strathmore's going down? I slid a folder across the table. Inside were projections, Nadia's masterpiece, showing exactly how vulnerable Strathmore was if Alios walked. I watched their faces as they read, watched the doubt harden into fear. By the end of the meeting, they didn't sign. Not yet, but I saw it in their eyes. They were thinking about it, and that was enough. I walked out of that building feeling like a king. Until I saw him, Thomas, standing by the curb, a phone in his hand, watching me with that smug, superior smile I used to admire. Marcus, he said, sliding his phone into his pocket. Making new friends, I see. I forced a smile. Just catching up. Don't play dumb, he said, stepping closer. I know what you're doing, and I'm here to tell you, it won't work. Strathmore will crush you. Like they crushed me. I said softly. Funny thing about people who get crushed, Thomas, sometimes they get back up. His smile faltered, just for a second. Then he patted my shoulder like I was a child. Enjoy your little game while it lasts. It'll be over soon. I watched him walk away, and in that moment, I knew something he didn't. The game wasn't ending. It was just beginning. I still remember the moment it happened. The night it all came together. The exact second my life changed. My office smelled of stale coffee and adrenaline. Nadia sat across from me, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she finalized the reports for Alios. Ethan was pacing, muttering under his breath, his hoodie damp from the downpour outside. "This is it," Nadia said without looking up. "If they sign tonight, Strathmore is done." I stared at the phone on the desk, waiting for it to ring, knowing that one call would change everything. For weeks, I'd been living like a ghost, barely eating, barely sleeping, running on rage and ambition. Every step I'd taken since the day they fired me had led to this moment. And then it happened. The screen lit up with Lila's name. I picked up. "Tell me you have good news." Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "My board wants to meet. Tonight. Off the record." "Where?" "Penthouse suite at the Lancaster. Midnight." I hung up without another word. Midnight. That gave me just enough time to prepare my final card, the one I'd been holding back for the perfect moment. By the time I walked into the Lancaster, the city was drowning in rain, and so was my suit. I didn't care. The penthouse smelled of wealth and old power, polished marble, expensive whiskey, the quiet hum of a room where billion-dollar decisions were made. Lila was there, of course, looking like she belonged on the cover of a magazine. The board sat behind her, their faces unreadable. I took a breath and laid it out, everything. The analytics platform Ethan built, the market projections Nadia uncovered, the roadmap that would take Alios beyond anything Strathmore could dream of. I didn't just sell them a service. I sold them a future. When I finished, there was silence. Long, heavy, suffocating. Then the CEO spoke. "And what do you need from us, Mr. Cole?" 51%, I said without blinking. "You keep control of operations. But the strategy, your future, belongs to me." It was a gamble so insane it bordered on suicidal. But if I'd learned anything from Strathmore, it was this: power isn't given. It's taken. They didn't answer right away. They murmured among themselves, voices low, faces tight. I waited, heartbeat pounding like a war drum. Finally, the CEO turned back to me. "You'll have it." For a moment, I didn't breathe. I just stayed, letting the words sink in. Then I nodded once, sharp and final. It was done. Except it wasn't. Because as I walked out of that room, a cold certainty gripped me. Thomas wasn't going to take this lying down. He'd fight. He'd burn the world to stop me. And I was ready for him. Or at least, I thought I was. The next morning, my inbox exploded. Lawsuits, cease and desist letters, anonymous threats. Strathmore came at me like a cornered animal, claws out, teeth bared. But they weren't the only ones playing dirty. I had my own game to play. I leaked the truth. Every shady deal, every compliance violation, every lie they'd buried under NDAs and offshore accounts. I didn't just burn bridges. I nuked them from orbit. By the end of the week, Strathmore's stock had plummeted 20%. By the end of the month, regulators were circling like vultures. And by the end of the quarter, Thomas was out, forced to resign under ethical concerns. The news made headlines. Strathmore implodes amid scandal. Rival firm emerges as market leader. My firm. My name. Everywhere. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt like a god. But victory isn't clean. It never is. One night, weeks later, I found myself back on that same rooftop bar where it all began. Lila was there, sipping her drink, her eyes glittering in the city lights. "You got what you wanted," she said softly. "Strathmore's ashes are still smoldering, and now you're the king." "Yeah," I said, staring at the skyline. "I did." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "And now you belong to us." I turned to look at her, and in that moment, I understood. Alios hadn't just signed a deal. They'd bought me, piece by piece. I was their weapon, their leverage, their pawn dressed up like a king. I smiled anyway, because that's the thing about kings. They only stay kings as long as they keep winning. And me? I wasn't done winning. Not by a long shot.